When people leave this earth, their loved ones are left with two things: memories and their stuff. And Grandma had a lot of stuff. So to honor my grandmother, I'm going to do a little show and tell for you all today. God definitely broke the mold when Elizabeth Louise Harriman was born to William Sr. and Naomi Harriman on July 29th, 1927. Growing up during the Depression shaped Bettie's formative years and resulted in a lifetime of frugality, collecting antiques, and hiding money under the mattress. She was also the oldest of 4 siblings, which is where we believe she learned how to boss people around. Bettie graduated from Kanawha High School in 1945 and started working as one of the first switchboard operators for the telephone company in Kanawha. It wasn't long after this she was swept off her feet at the Surf Ballroom by Bob Johnson. They were united in marriage on March 24th, 1947 at the Little Brown Church in Nashua, Iowa. Which brings me to my first piece, milk glass. Grandma used their wedding money and bought her first set of milk glass dishes and kept collecting them for the rest of her life. She went to hundreds of auctions and garage sales over the years looking for the perfect pieces to add to her collection. Over the decades, she collected hundreds of pieces, which I am now the proud owner of. To this union, Lee, John B., and Scott were born, and they tested her patience every day since. This brings me to the infamous wooden spoon. Whenever one of the kids or grandkids did something bad, Grandma always threatened to paddle our behinds with the wooden spoon. I don't ever actually remember being hit with the wooden spoon, but the threat was enough to terrify you. There was one time, though, when Grandma did get mad at me. I was sitting underneath the dining room table playing with scissors and decided to cut a piece of my hair. So when Grandma found me holding the hair and the scissors, she marched me up the 1 block to the post office. And she made a photocopy of my hands and taped the hair to it, so I would never forget what I did. And I have never cut my hair again. Bob and Bettie lived and farmed south of Britt until 1992 when they moved into town. Besides helping on the farm, Bettie worked at Winnebago and found roles in her 2 favorite things, food and gardening. She oversaw the congregate meal program in Britt for many years and then managed the greenhouse at Britt Food Center. The role that tested her the most, though, was raising 3 rambunctious boys who never seemed to listen. Their debate for favorite son will live on forever, but the debate for favorite granddaughter was settled many years ago. After the boys grew up, Bettie really got to enjoy her passions, which included buying milk glass dishes at auctions, sewing, gardening, and reading. Over the years, she sewed many patches onto her children's and grandchildren's clothing and stitched together many creations, including a princess Halloween costume for Whitney. She was well known for her green thumb and her ability to bring plants back to life. Throughout her life, Bettie never stopped learning, and she was a frequent flyer at the Britt Public Library. She was often referred to as the expert in the family because of her wealth of knowledge on a variety of topics, home remedies, and unsolicited advice. Here is Grandma's library bag that she would carry back and forth. It was usually filled with various books or, the latest copy of Reader's Digest. Anytime you mentioned the weather, the Farmer's Almanac would come out. And Grandma was the queen of home remedies. So much so that she once created a notebook for me with all of the different home remedies. Each page is a different letter. Did you know that arthritis can be cured by soaking a box of golden raisins in gin and then eating 9 of them every day? It can also be cured with Diet Coke. I remember one night Jenny and I had a sleepover at Grandma's house, and Jenny had a cough. When I woke up the next morning, Jenny told me how in the middle of the night Grandma had made her gargle salt water and then eat prunes for her stomach ache. You may have noticed in the program we aren't doing communion today. That's because everyone will be getting a zinc tablet instead. This was the equivalent to holy water for Grandma. I remember in college I came down with a nasty cold, so I went to Target to buy some zinc. I couldn't find a bottle, so I asked the pharmacist where they would be located, and he asked me what I needed them for. I proceeded to tell him to cure my cold, and he said that zinc doesn't cure colds. I looked at him and said, well, that's not what my grandmother says, and I walked out, and I didn't buy anything. I don't need to spend my money there. Bettie was very active in the community. She was a member of the Britt VFW and the United Methodist Church, teaching Sunday school for many years. She never hesitated to speak her piece at the Britt City Council meetings and was a huge fan of the National Hobo Convention every year, so much so that she was knighted as an honorary hobo and given the name Boxcar Bettie. Bettie was also the unofficial watchdog of the community. Every time you walked into her house, the scanner was on full blast. My mom and I got a phone call anytime there was bad weather, or when she heard somebody's name come across the scanner. If your name was called across the scanner, she would proceed to get the plat book out and figure out where you lived, who your parents were, and what you did for a living. She also had the police codes memorized, so she knew what you were getting in trouble for probably before you did. My favorite memory was when my friend Morgan got pulled over for speeding and Grandma called me. One of my all-time favorite stories of her community involvement was right before my 21st birthday. I was on my way to her house, driving down Main Street, and I saw this figure walking down the sidewalk. Didn't take me long to realize it was Grandma briskly walking towards City Hall with something in her hands. As I'm pulling up, she's walking through the doors of City Hall, holding hedge clippers. And I remember looking at Morgan, and we both just knew this wasn't good. So I walk into City Hall, and I see Grandma shaking these hedge clippers, telling the front desk that if the city isn't going to trim her neighbor's tree, she was going to do it herself. I then proceeded to take the hedge clippers out of my grandma's hand and take her home. And do you know why Grandma wanted those trees trimmed? So she could sit on her front porch and look down Main Street. There is no doubt that Bettie made a lasting impression with everyone she came in contact with, no matter if it was for a few minutes or many years. She had a slew of one-liners, including her most infamous reply to when asked how she was doing, just as fat and sassy as ever. Or, never do anything that you can't tell at the breakfast table. She was also extremely blunt. She once told me, "You're Irish, Dutch, and Bohemian. God help the man that marries you, Whitney." Despite her bluntness, Bettie was a loving wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, sister, and friend. Her family is going to miss her amazing cooking, especially her Christmas Eve apple crisp, her frequent newspaper clippings, the sassy comments, and her ability to always keep them on her toes. Thank you.